This might be hard for some people to believe considering what I do for a living, but the only Apple device I ever bought with my own money was a first gen iPod Touch, probably around 2008. Now, it's not because I have some vendetta against Apple where I think iPhones are bad or MacBooks are bad. I just don't have any interest in them. There's nothing about them that draws me in. I have a propensity to go against the grain, okay? When there's the really popular thing and then the other thing that's kind of different and cool but not as popular, I'm going to be going that way. That's just how I have always been. Again, it's not because I think iPhones are bad, I just am not drawn towards them. But the news we're going to be talking about here in this video might be the first time in my life that I feel a pull towards an iPhone. What we have here is a post on the Chinese social media website Weibo by Digital Chat Station, who many of you probably recognize that name of by now. They are quite a reputable tech tipster, and they are talking about Apple's long-rumored folding iPhone. And there are some details here that are very, very interesting. Now, some of this stuff is, look, we're going from Chinese to English, and some of it might get a little bit garbled, but we're going to do our best to kind of explain what he's saying here. So first off, we are in an unfinalized testing stage. The latest screen is 7.58 inches with a 14.1 by 10 aspect ratio. We're going to park here for just a moment because this image that he attached, I think many of you already know where I'm going with this and why I am going there. Yes, indeed. The reason that I might for the first time ever be interested in an iPhone is because of the first gen Pixel Fold. You guys know how much I absolutely adore this device. And that image that he attached of this kind of screen size and aspect ratio looks strikingly similar to the first gen Pixel Fold. Now, one obvious reason for this is that this aspect ratio, this size and shape of a screen is quite reminiscent of the iPad mini, and that's going to be something that Apple is quite familiar with. But again, 7.58 inches, that's basically the same size diagonal as that first gen Pixel Fold. And because, look, we're not dumb, we can look at this shape and we can imagine folding it over. Well, guess what that's going to get you? It's going to get you a cover display that is very, very similar to the cover display on the Pixel Fold. For those of you who are maybe big Apple fans and are not really familiar with this phone, the reason so many of us adored this form factor was because you got a mini phone, basically. Some people really love the iPhone mini, but people didn't really buy it enough to support it, to sustain that phone's existence. What you basically have here is a Pixel Mini. It's a device that you can reach to the very top of relatively easily. It's great for one-handed use. Pull it out quickly, send a text message, do some social media stuff, take some photos, something like that. But the problem with an iPhone mini or a Pixel Mini is that sometimes you want that larger screen. Maybe you want to do something that just requires more space. Maybe you want to split screen multitask. Maybe you want to watch some content. Well, guess what? You don't have the downsides of a mini phone with this form factor because it opens up and then you have a much larger screen. And it is a screen that is wider than it is tall. For whatever reason, Google decided after only one version of this phone to abandon this form factor and go towards a form factor that most folding phones now have, where they are prioritizing the outer screen, making this basically like a standard phone. And then when you open it, the screen is obviously still much larger, but it's more square than it is a true tablet. Apple, again, according to this leak, and it is a leak, it is a rumor, appears to be set to pick up where Google left off, and that is what might actually pull me in that direction because I adore this form factor. I could go on and on about this. Modern foldables now are giant phones that become colossal phones rather than mini phones that become small tablets, which makes so much more sense to me, but I won't continue just banging on and on about this subject. We will move on to the next part of this. The hinge is a composite material of amorphous metallic glass that is more resistant to manufacturing. So we've heard rumors for a while that Apple is going to be using what they call liquid metal in the hinge of this device. Currently, I think that they use liquid metal in their SIM ejector tool. Basically, it's just a really cool material that in some way is going to be useful mixed with the titanium alloy of the body itself. Just going to come down to the build quality and what Apple is doing with that hinge to prevent the screens from cracking, to reduce the crease, on and on and on. But they also, actually, I skipped a sentence here. The image is 48 megapixel double shot. So I think what they're saying there is that there is a dual camera setup. Two 48 megapixel cameras. And honestly, that's kind of surprising to me. A foldable phone with only two cameras seems to be a little bit on the weak side. And I know some of you will also look at the fact that he's claiming it's going to be a 7.58-inch screen, and then you think about these other foldables that are on the market that are all, 8-inch, 8.1-inch, or even maybe 8.2 inches for the Galaxy Z Fold 7. That might also seem a little bit on the unimpressive side when it comes to this device. Now, my understanding is that the iPhone 16 Pro has a 48 megapixel primary, a 48 megapixel ultra wide, and then a lower resolution telephoto. I believe that's correct. So maybe they're just going to get rid of the telephoto, and that's basically going to be your camera setup. Maybe the depth of a periscope sensor is not something they've quite figured out yet, but that would leave you with a primary and an ultra wide, which for me would be a pretty darn big downside, as someone who just said in a prior video that telephoto zoom is really important to me. Now, of course, this device is not even announced, so we don't know when it's coming. We don't know how much it's going to cost. The rumors are maybe 2026, and it's probably going to be very, very expensive. Something like with the Z Fold 7, around $2,000, maybe even more than that, because it is an Apple product, and it's going to be something that's going to sell in low volume, so they may push that price pretty darn high. But nonetheless, based on these rumors, based on this potential form factor, what I want to know from you fine folk watching this video, who I would assume are probably mostly Android users because you're watching my channel, how tempting would this be to you? Would you actually look at an iPhone, basically an iPhone mini that opens up into an iPad mini? Maybe they can make this software work where it's iOS and then it's iPad OS, and you get the floating windows or Stage Manager or something like that. How tempting would this be to you, knowing that that foldable would have the full benefit of Apple's ecosystem? Maybe you already own a MacBook. Maybe you've always admired those iPod, whatever the headphone ones are, those things. Maybe you've admired those from afar. Would this be something that would make you think, man, maybe I'm going to go over to iOS, or maybe I'm going to go back to Apple, where you have potentially been before? Guys, lots of really interesting conversations I think should come out of this. So thanks for watching. Thanks for having those conversations in the comments down below. Subscribe for more content just like this. And if you want to see the article that I wrote up, it is in the description down below over on shanecraig.tech, where you will often see little sneak peeks at the content that is to come, because I will often write up an article that helps me gather my thoughts, and then I will turn that into a video. So go check that out as well. Subscribe for more content just like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.